that do not know Marv, Marv has been our landscape expert. This is his 60th year with us here. So if you have any questions at all after he's done, he probably knows the answer. And he'll tell it to you like it is, whether you want to hear it or not. So with that, go ahead, Marv.
Okay. I want to thank you all for coming. Hope give you some ideas and thoughts to think about. Most important thing, does anybody know why we really trim? You got it. It's to make a healthy plant. Also, keep them in size-wise, durability and everything. So the whole idea mainly is getting rid of old, dead, decaying branches, making room for new branches. If you never do anything the rest of your life, buy a good pair of pruning shears. I'm sure you all have at home. This is an amber cut bar. Don't ever buy them. That's the one where the blade comes down into a flat bar. What happens with them, everybody cuts bigger than what they should cut, and they twist, and I've never seen a pair of them last more than a couple times using them, and they're worthless. If you ever have a pair of pruners at home when you're using them, the nut is loosening up, tightening up. The thing is sticking, not coming back. It takes all the fun out of pruning. It's going to sound like I'm pushing these things I'm coming up to, and I really am, but you pay what you get. Ladies' pairs are $59, men's pairs $70. I'm buy in America. These are Japanese shears. It's the best on the market though. Pair I got on my side, they're probably 35, 40 years old. I used them here back in the day. I used to cut muddy roots, tops of trees in the spring. We did all bare root potting, and I'd stand back there for 8 hours a day doing nothing but pruning. I lent them out one day. They came back, and I said, "What'd you do to these?" He said, "I had some wire to cut." They got a couple little nicks in them, and that made me mad, so I went and bought my second pair. These are the ones I keep at the house and I use. These are the ones I'm going to use tonight. Still nothing wrong with them. But you hardly ever have to sharpen them. They never stick. The spring looks like something was probably going to fall apart. Felco's is an American-made brand. They used to come with an extra blade, and they come with an extra spring. Why did they come with an extra blade and an extra spring? Got to be something wrong. JR, the one that writes all the articles, we first got a hold of these things. It's a cute little fast story. He was up at one of the bigger nurseries up in Painesville one day, and the daytime crew came in, a whole bunch of Mexicans, and they all sat down. They got their rags out, their oils out, and they're sit there and they started cleaning everything. He asked the owners, "What's going on?" He says, "We used to send them out with just regular shears. They wouldn't work, they wouldn't cut, the nuts were loosening and tightening, like I said." He says, "These things just plain work. They take so much pride in them." They said they used to spend so much money replacing shears because they just leave them laying all around. But he says they just loved them so much that they come back, they got their own names on them, they put them in their lockers. But these are, has anybody purchased these over the years? They're here? We sold a lot of them. We don't even have them out for sale. They're behind the registers because a lot of people just look at the price and they have a heart attack. But Ukazumis, very good stuff. Highly recommend them. Remember, don't ever buy the amber cut. These are head shears, which most people know what those are. Electric shears work on the same principle. When we get going here, there's certain applications for these. Most of the time, I'm going to tell you not to use them, and you'll see why as we get going along. Pair of loppers are always good. That'll cut anything that these won't cut. You should cut anything that you can cut comfortably with a pair of pruners. After that, you should go to something just a little larger. This is another little pocket saw. Sometimes when you get into some of your shrubs and that, you can't get a pair of loppers or something in there and a bigger thing. That's where you can get the saw down in there and just saw them out. That's pretty much it for the machinery there. If anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and we'll try to answer them as we go. Okay, this is a sea green juniper. And like I was saying before, most people have them in their yards. Everything's a round ball. How many people have bushes that are all getting dead on the sides and they're dead in the middle? That's from doing that shearing on them, because every place you cut a branch, you're multiplying branches. One branch turns into 3. The next year you cut those 3, they turn into 9. You cut them, they turn into 27. Next thing, there's no air coming through the plant. That's where you get all that stuff dying inside. You're just inviting fungus and disease to get on your shrub, and that's where a lot of those problems. You want to try to have as much air going through them as you can. Now, sometimes when people do prune right, they'll go and prune here like that. Next year, they'll go and prune in the same place. Well, then you might as well take your shears and do this. But when you go and prune properly, you look for the longer ones and you reach back in. You look for cross branching members. If you see a branch here going that way, that's a branch you want to get out of there, like this one's coming up and over. But what you want to do is reach back down in and cut a big pocket out of there.
So you're saying that if it's like a Y, you cut one of the arms off the Y.
You actually want to cut one of them off or go beyond it. I call it knuckling.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good example right here. Let me get him up here. Now this thing's been cut back with just regular shears, and they do it here just for speed, time, and everything. Now what's going to happen here, that's where that was trimmed there. You see those 5 or 6 branches have jointed there. This one here's only got a couple. This one's got 3, that's got 3. Now what you're going to do, if you got the big shears, or even these, you'll probably go in here and start doing this stuff. Now all that's going to do is knuckle up just above that. So what we want to do, which I'll get into that after we finish this, we're going to get down in there and we're going to cut whole branches and sections out. No, you can see him.
No. I heard him sit because he was right in front of me.
Okay, so we're going to get going on this guy a little bit more. There's a branch coming up, so you reach down in there. You look for the bigger ones as much as possible.
So when you cut it off like that knuckle below the Y, does you get more growth at that spot?
Well, what you're doing is you're going to get a breakage there, but you're making it deep down in. You're making it at a different spot. Okay. You're not just cutting everything at the same level. So you see the big pieces I'm cutting out of there?
Is it okay to come in and shear it and then come in and give it air after?
You can. I call it cheating. When I get to the boxwoods, you can do it. I like seeing you go through them first and thin them out, then if you want to go. But on a juniper like this, it really isn't going to take you that long to prune this thing out. Now, you see I've been yakking a lot. And another reason why you want to do major pruning on an evergreen like this, sometimes you will see some of those white spots where you prune them off, but you won't notice that once the new growth comes out right away. So you have that natural bush that's going to sit there and look like it should look. They're hard, woody things. It can be done. For an average homeowner, I don't know if it'd be worth it for the time it's going to take and the percentage you're going to get to make it. I tell you to go online. I've never really got into the propagation end of it. That's how they're all started. There's air layering. They wrap the branch with some fiber or a peat moss, like coarse peat moss, and they put a plastic wrap around. Sometimes you can take a branch and things like a butterfly bush or a euonymus. You can lay it under the ground and bury it, and it will root there. It gets rooted, you can cut it off. But all shrubs mostly are started from cutting, so it can be done.
Now, if you're thinning it out like that's to help it grow and not get sick. But let's say you have a wall of arborvitaes and you want to
that's a different. No, that's a different story. Okay. It's feasibly impossible to do a pair of hand pruners on them. That's where you get your head shears, electric shears, and if you use electric shears, just make sure you sharpen them. You go back a week, 2 later after you cut, and they got all jagged ends. You'll see that right away, but they all turn brown at the edges if the things aren't sharp. So, arborvitaes, One of the few things, an Alberta spruce, which is the most misused plant in the whole nursery industry. I can get into that, but those are all things that got so many branches, you can't prune them with these. You'd be there forever. So those you want to shear. And if you do shear, they're like this. There's nothing wrong with shearing it if you want. That's going to give you that very formal look. It's just the whole idea. You are going to make that condensed situation that's just inviting fungus and disease down the road. And somewhere down the road, you generally got to let it get a little bigger, unless you get avid with it and trim them a couple times a year. If you can do that, my mother had taxes. They were in 30 years. They probably weren't hardly any bigger than the day she planted them, but she went out twice a year with the head shears and she made everything a round ball. And now if you want to live with that, that's fine. But then I'm going to tell you to trim twice a year, because then you're just cutting late growth. What happens is something that grows fast, you just trim it once a year and you start shearing it. There's a point in time where you can't cut it anymore. People probably got burning bushes at home, and they're up this big and they get bigger and you can't trim them because you're trimming into all that heavy knuckling that I'm trying not to get by doing a pair of hand pruners and trim them properly. Now, I don't know if you paid any attention when I started. This backside was quite a bit higher than this front side. Right now, I got as close. So right now, I would probably stop with this right now. But then if you got time, 2 months from now, July, August, you just run out there, take a basket with you. There's no cleaning up to do when you prune this way either. You have a basket, a wheelbarrow, something next to you. I trimmed a Japanese maple. It's been in for 40 years at the house this morning. It took me 20 minutes. I took a whole great big garbage can full of clippings off it. I do it every year, and it's just what you should do. I want you to pass these two around. This is a Japanese snowbell I planted out. It's been out front. It's been out there 8 years. It ain't any taller. Look at and just pass it on. The one side's before, the other side's after, and see how much stuff has been taken out of there. That tree could have been probably another 5-6 feet taller and could have been probably 7-8 foot across by now if you just would have let it grow. And it's not a real fast growing thing. I don't know if anybody's ever paid attention to our gardens out front as you come in. There's a ginkgo out there. It's a dwarf variety. It's got a trunk on it like that. It's this tall. It's this big around. But every year I go and I'm going to trim it like I'm going to show you how to get into the deciduous things. Here too, again, like I said, this is pretty much done now. 3 months from now, this gets the new growth. It grows pretty fast. It may be like this. This one may be. That's where you just walk in there. Then you cut the longer ones off. And then it doesn't take half the time. Now, if you've got an old one that you've been trimmed wrong for so many years, you're kind of stuck with it on a juniper because it's going to be dead in the middle. You can't cut back in it. But if you get a young plant, that's what you should do. Any questions on anything so far? That's a Japanese snowbell weeping. It's out front, right by the little garden area by the road.
That's a juniper, right?
Yes, sea green juniper.
So is now the time for pruning that?
Oh yeah, you can do evergreens like this. You can trim all summer long. Ideally, though, if you can do them early spring, late fall, you get that new growth. It just covers them over, and it just makes them look a little better. Percentage-wise, though, evergreens for the most part you can trim anytime. We talked about spruces earlier before everybody got here. A spruce tree, blue spruce, Norway spruces, all them, just for the sake of getting the callus over again around the middle of June is the absolute proper time this year. That's when all the growers do it. You prune too late in the year, you just get a bunch of chopped off looks on the ends of your branches. Doesn't hurt the plant any, but all kinds of different cypress. I usually like hand pruning on them. Some of your dwarf lower ones, you can use a pair of shears on them. I don't like jumping all over the place, but let's just grab this thing here now. We have a hard time finding bushes to bring in for this because they whacked everything wrong out back there to begin with. But
So what is this one here?
this is a fire chief arborvitae. It's in the arborvitae family. Don't look like an arborvitae. But back again to doing a little different.
How tall would that plant get if you didn't do anything?
It's big. I could get big.
Well,
If you didn't do anything.
if you didn't do anything, it's probably going to end up about 5 foot tall, 5 foot across. Back again, dwarf plants do not stay small. Dwarf plants are just smaller than what they've been propagated off of. In the long run, most dwarf plants are harder to maintain to its size. Once you get there, it's going to take a longer time to get there than a fast growing plant. But if it hasn't been pruned right, it kills itself out in the middle, like nest spruce, for instance. Everybody gets these, says dwarf bird's nest. They're not used nowhere near like they were 20, 30 years ago, because everybody used them as that little in front plant, planted them along the sidewalk, left this much room. Well, this is one of those plants. If you shear them, you're stuck. That thing's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to take a long time to get too big, but it's going to get too big.
So every time you shear them, they get bigger.
You do that multiplication of branches,
Okay.
and it gets to the point where it kills itself out, which I said before. So ideally, now this is something that takes a little extra time, but I'm going to tell you, take the time and do it. But you're going to go back in there and cut stuff out like that. Now, if you watch, you can't really tell I took it out either. Now, if I took these shears and sheared it, it would look like a stuffed old round ball, but you're really hurting that plant down the road. But by pocketing big branches out of there like this, and looking for the big ones, you're always going to be opening it up. You're able to get air to go through it and breathe.
So I bought a, it's kind of a spruce. I bought it here. It's in a ball like this. And so I would be pruning that.
Is it a blue one?
It's kind of, yes.
Yeah, dwarf globe spruces, same thing again, 30, 40 years ago when they first become popular. It's really an upright spruce that's a little slower than the standard ones that they just train into a globe form and cut the tops out when they're small. Yeah, definitely the same principle. You go through it and just go back in randomly. Now that's a plan. If you do it 2 or 3 times a year, work on it, you're going to keep up with things without spending tons of time and getting the backache all at one time.
It's like probably the 4th year now, and the ball keeps getting a little bit bigger.
Just don't shear them, but definitely keep trimming. That's one of those slow process ones that you're going, it ain't too bad yet, it ain't too bad. Next thing you know, it's going to be bigger than you, and then it's going to be too late to do anything
And like
too.
you said, you can see the brown stuff, inside of it in some places.
Yeah, well, they have to see it to be sure, but yeah, and if you got a lot of brown, that's where you may want to sometimes make some improper cuts. Maybe don't, if you got a hole there with a little bit of green, you might want to just trim as much little ones as you can until you start getting the fullness there. We were talking about arborvitae. Now this ain't normally, I could make this a pyramid. It's like holly, its natural growth isn't pyramidal form, the English hollies, but you can make a pyramid. It just takes you a little bit longer. A lot of times with these things, shape-wise, sometimes with these we get in there and we make little balls out of them. And those ain't cutting good. JR, is that you or Michael?
Nobody.
Not the hat.
Hey, Michael. Can you get me a pair of head shears in a hurry?
So say you wanted this plant to get not taller, but fatter. So,
Yeah.
So you just you trim the outside a couple of times a year so it has more branches and it comes out that way?
Pretty much, yeah. What I'm trying to do here, there's this one lady in Lorraine. She had 5 of these. They were planted for about 4 or 5 years. They were like this big, this big. She says, get them out. I don't like them. They're just different. I says, wait a minute. I'm going to have my guy trim them for you, and then you see if you want to pull them out or not. These things ain't cutting.
I gotta go get it.
Anyhow, we got done. She calls them her Mickey Mouse plants. And her favorite plant all around her house. And she's got a lot of plants. But we just went and followed the undulations that was growing naturally with them. Now I can round this one off, make a round ball out of it right now. Like I said, I could make a pyramid out of it if I wanted to. But now if you start shearing, this is a plant you have to shear because you see there's so many small branches you can't do the hand pruning on it. But once she gets me something to cut, we'll finish him up.
You know what? You have a plant like that you neglected, and it got 5 feet tall, but you want it to be 3 feet tall.
If it's one of these, they're going to be dead in the middle automatically. That's just the nature of that plant. I'd have to know the variety and the name. You can cut back as far as you got greenery. A lot of plants, once you get into that brown section, it won't break new wood off of there again. So depending on the plant, but if you can reach in there, is it got a lot of big branches or is it a thick full foliage on it?
It's huge. It's probably 8 foot.
And you don't know what kind of plant it is.
It's very common. You see everywhere.
Taxus?
I'm sorry,
Okay. Cut it back.
It's very soft, greenish that you see everywhere. But usually see them 3 feet tall around everyone's homes.
Well, sometime you're in the area, bring a branch in.
Okay.
And if I ain't around, somebody here could probably help you or leave a note for Marv, and I'll get back with you. Okay, now this here is a pinnacle hydrangea. These are the ones that stuck.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Kennedy. These start blooming in around July, bloom all the way up to the end of the year. This is a tree form. This is a very, very poor representation of a plant. Way it is. Number one, this branch should have been worked on earlier. Thank you. Just going to quickly do this one. Oh, yeah. Oh, those are ones they stick in the mud out back, and you call that the help situation.
Now on a boxwood, would you trim it that way? Or are you able to go in and
Okay.
give it air?
No, I like this is what I call the ones I'm going to say is cheating. We'll do a boxwood, then we'll get into Mr. Kennedy's hydrangeas. I think you can follow through what I'm trying to do here. Little ball here, little ball here. You ever see magazine pictures of poodle plants that's got ball here? When they get older, they sort of grow together and they just undulate around and that. You can do the same thing with that. Now, technically, the way most people have them,
Now these cuttings you cut off, can't you just leave those around the plant and won't that fertilize the ground or nope?
if you like the looks of it, it's going to turn brown and look ugly.
But will it help the plant in the long run?
It's a form of mulch, yeah. It ain't going to hurt nothing.
Okay, just gonna be okay.
Now, if you trim these are how these should be trimmed. So you got your choice. You want a little character as it gets bigger and grow, do the little undulation thing too. If you just want the round ball, you can get away with once a year shearing. If you like that real formal look, trim them twice a year. Okay, boxwood, since he mentioned boxwood. Now this one hasn't been sheared hardly at all. Most people have boxwoods that are real tight, real rounded. Yeah, you can do that. If you got 4 or 5 of them, you want that formal look, this is a great plant to do it with. Or the Rhinegold if you want formal. These are both plants that are going to be easy to keep under 2 foot. no matter, as long as you keep up with them. They both have the potential of getting 5, 6, 7, 8 foot. If you read the books will probably tell you maybe 2 foot or 3 foot on that, probably tell you 2 foot on that. I tell anybody you get a size in a book, what the plan is, go times 2 or times 3 and probably get the true size that it can really get to. And they go, why do they do that? And nobody buy them. It's just going back to this one, we're going to keep with that same philosophy. I really like this thinness with the pockets in them and stuff.
See, that's what I talked about. Wives, see, that's why we need the video.
See, I made a little cut there. See now, if I liked informal, I could probably stop right there. And then when it grows again, back again. These will be the tall ones. Like this has got a thick spot in there, so pop that out of
Like
there.
you said, that one's never been sheared.
It might have got hit a couple years ago, but
So
when it was small.
in the boxwood, you just look for a thick area and you want to thin out the thick area.
If you want to go through with a pair of pruners like this first, if you got a thick one, and you can go back in generally. If it's an old plant that's been sheared, it's going to be dead back in somewhere. But if you go through there and take the time to pocket some 3-4 inch things out, then if you want to follow through. Now this one here, I'm not trimming back as far as I can because I want a bigger plant with the presumption down the road, I want a real formal plant that's going to get bigger. Now, if I don't want it big, see, I'm able to trim relatively easy because it ain't got that thickness and density of all the knuckles that everybody makes. Now this one with another flush of growth, if you come back in June, it's going to be very, very close to sheared again. And it's going to be one thick picture looking boxwoods. So you just have to determine, do I want a little more natural look? And sometimes you can get a good natural look too by just trimming boxwoods early in the spring, go through and pocket prune and shear and just leave them go the rest of the year. That way you're going to have tails. But if you like the formal thing, it takes a little time on a bigger boxwood to do that. And like I said, if you want it just totally sheared, try to do it twice a year if you can.
Well, you keep using the term formal thing. What do you mean when you say formal?
Real smooth, tight, structure.
Okay.
So Marv, if you keep doing that, aren't you going to get a dead center? Or
Not if I keep.
if you keep
See, no, let's just say this is real thick or a thicker one. That's where I'd want to go through first before I prune it the next time.
You're going to go in and take it all out.
I'd make some pocket. That's one of those, you got to give and take.
Did you do the same thing to Doitz's?
With what?
Deutzies. She said do the same thing to Deutzies.
Deutzia.
Oh.
Okay.
I like the way she said it.
Same thing is what we're going to do here.
Okay.
And we'll do that. And your spireas, deutzias, hydrangeas, pretty much in the same thing. We're going to go back to this thing. Number one, there's a crossover branch coming from over here going up there. This should have been taken out a long time ago. Now, see, that branch should have been cut off at the beginning. Nothing was really happening much with it. They just sort of trimmed it once, and that was it, and they just let it go. Now, it was trimmed up here. You can see where it was trimmed? Those are all trim marks. So if I go here, which is a bad trim, we're going to talk about nodes. These little brackets, buds come, those are called nodes. They 1/4 inch above them. Don't leave them long, because if you leave them long, that will never shoot a growth again. Like there's a node there and a node there. So if I go and cut it at the bottom of that one, that will never grow. They're just going to sit there and be dead.
Because it's too long after.
Yeah, and they just don't break growth out of there again.
Okay.
Now, there's two things I can do here. I can alleviate this and work on a small rounded one, which within a year and a half time is going to make a beautiful little plant again. Or I can trim this part lightly, cut this back, and let this mature into that one. So we'll go that route first.
Now, when you, at the end of the year, when the hydrangeas are done blooming and they're brown like that, I usually just cut them back 4 nodes and then.
Well, the thing to do, they don't turn brown and ugly like this until freeze. Then if you want to take your hydrangeas, that's really the time to trim them. If you want to go out and just trim them off, you might as well trim them right and have it over with.
So by trimming them right, all those buds that you're cutting off, if I want to leave the height of that plant, I would just trim the flower part.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to leave all that. I'm not going to touch much on this side.
I understand on this one.
Yeah.
On a nice shape.
Let's say that, see this one, they just went through and cut all the flowers off.
You cut already the flowers off?
They cut them all back. Yeah, this thing's all been sheared with a pair of those things, which theoretically they shouldn't have.
So when I look at mine, I see buds coming out.
Yeah.
But I don't know how far to cut it back. Where's the point that you cut it back to? You see the bud?
You,
I mean, there's a flower on it like you have on that tree.
My question is that when it's so tall, why are you cutting it? You don't want it to be tall?
not that side, because
Oh,
thing's
because
lopsided.
Oh, okay. I'm catching. I'm slow, but I'm getting there.
Ideally, whenever possible, you got something like, let's say there's 3 or 4 of them there. You don't want to cut there because that's just developing the 3 or 4 too close together. So if that, you want to take that off, take it off right there.
Okay.
Now this one, if you wanted to leave it, there's a bud there. See that from there to the end will never grow. It's just going to turn brown and dead. So ideal cut is on an angle 1/4 inch above a bud if you want to leave it.
You could bring back some more, is that correct?
Oh yeah, but whenever possible. Here's the thing: if you do have a hole, and let's just say I ain't going to cut this all the way off. I'm going to go to this node here. Now, what's going to happen there? I'm going to get one of those knuckles there next year. Now, if I need a branch there, I will do it. But with the pretension next year when I trim, I'm going to get that branch off there because this stuff grows fast enough. You're going to have new branches come out of there all over the place. That's why that one's so thick. That one's been pruned a lot when it's young. Now, yours should be down at least this far, if not farther, but you got to go through and thin too. We'll get there in a second. Okay.
What if the deer ate it really bad last year and you didn't get any blossoms? You still try to cut it down?
Treat it just like a shrub. The deer love the flowers. I'm going to get into that a little later. How to keep
Because I got one of those.
if you got a hydrangea and the deer ate it last year, they're going to eat it this year. But I got deer, I feed the deer, and I got hydrangeas. And the ones I want to keep them off of, I keep them off of it. Now this one here, just to get rid of the ugly, see this is a branch going sideways, we don't even want that.
Now, that thing of cutting just above the nose, is that, what I should be using, like roses and things like that too, or?
Roses you should go through right now and get any dead wood out of them you can. Now, if you happen to have a healthy rose and there's just tons and tons of canes, take about 1/3 of them out. And take the weakest ones out and take some of the biggest ones out. But that's something you want to do very quickly before they get going.
I actually cut them all down to about 10 inches from the ground.
Well, that's a little drastic. It ain't going to hurt them any. That'd be a good start over point.
Well, they were all diseased.
They're going to be. That's another thing I'll talk in a little bit about. This is the time, if you got roses, start putting the 6-week preventive thing on them. So this one here, I'd be happy with it right now with that. You won't recognize this thing when it leaves out. And next year it's going to look something like this. Now, ideally, you want to open up the centers whenever possible. this plant is way too thick. Yeah, I'll get that later. Okay, so now what I'm doing is still looking up through the center and thickness. Competing branches. See the two? Don't need both of them. If I want it to be a smaller plant, I'd probably go for the outside one off. This isn't that big, so I'm going to take the inside one off. Now I still got tons of branching in here. Now, just getting rid of some of the knuckles without cutting down any lower. That's a tall one going up through there. That one's crossing over. We don't want that. I'm going to alleviate it totally.
Now, the cutting that you're doing on this plant that you're working on right now, by midsummer, this thing is going to be beautiful, or is it next year that when that one?
It's going to be beautiful in about 3 weeks from now.
Okay.
And it's going to have flowers on it to no end. That's what yours should look like right now.
Yeah, I turned them all the way down. I got about 20 of them. And
You ain't got 20 of them.
after 2 years, they just took off. I mean, there must be.
That's the reason why you want to keep up with them. Because if you let them go and just cut them back, you get that ugly looking burning bush there.
Well, the Pinnacles was the only one that could really do that with, is that correct?
What's that?
The Pinnacle. The
Uh,
Pilatos.
Yeah, the microphiliums, they're a pain in the neck. You can literally get one that may never ever bloom for you. You may have 3 of them. You may have 2 of them that's got tons of flowers. One that's only got 1 or 2. Every year is different. You have microphiliums right in your front. Yours bloom pretty consistent though, don't they? That's what you want, but they're just a fussy little plant. You want to cut them. You're going to talk to 10 different people and you're going to come up with at least 8 different ways of when to trim them, how to trim them. The growers trim all theirs. These ever blooming varieties are out now, or repeat bloomers. They trim around the middle of August. You're going along with, they have flowers on them then, but they say that's the time to do them for peak results. So that's when we tell everybody trim the microphiliums middle of August. Because then they'll reset buds and you should get some blooms for the fall again too, because they're supposed to be repeat bloomers. They used to call them ever blooming on the tags. They don't even put that on them now because there's times they don't have flowers or that, so they call them repeat bloomers because they were having too much trouble.
Now, would you do that same type of trimming for a weeping larch?
Yeah, definitely. Weeping larches are beautiful plants, but if the worst thing about them, they get too thick, they can have a lot more character. You're going to keep a healthier one by thinning them out.
Mine is, well, I've had it for 2 years, and it's already touching the ground. The ones that are touching the ground, do I need to trim those off so they don't touch the ground?
You just don't go straight across. Do the same thing as what we've been doing.
Okay.
Back in. Some people like them skirting out. Some places they want them. They'll go down and skirt out 3-4 foot if you got the room for them to do it. No sidewalk involved.
Okay.
Doesn't hurt to sit on the ground, but it's your call if you want to see them on the ground or off the ground. But if you want them off the ground, have one hang here, cut one so it's up here. Have him hang down here, have one up, down, up. But don't be afraid to thin it. It's been in for a couple of years and it's doing good. It should be getting fairly thick, and it will do nothing but get thicker.
Okay, how about the burning bush? Is that same rule?
This is a burning bush here. And this one wasn't taken care of when it was young either. This is a rough one. This is why if you got plants that are under control, it would be a quick, easy fix. This thing's going to have rubbing branches. That one's sort of going from this way to that way. I dare any of you to cut your branch at home with that big with a pair of your pruners. Okay, that made a world of difference already. Can you see what that did? Okay, now do I want to, yeah, we're gonna go with that.
Well, my burning bush was so large, I lost one last year. Was that because it was just?
That's because yours in the back.
Yeah.
That's because you butchered them with those shears for so many years.
Hey, we've been together 45 years, so you can talk that way. He's already tore off the stuff we put in 4 years ago last year. So.
Yeah, I don't like that little nub there. If I had a bigger one, I'd get rid of it, but leave that. Okay, we're getting there now. Okay, so this is, don't need all that. We're just going to pretend this thing's going to get bigger. So there's, no, I didn't like that cut, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to get rid of this. But next year, I'm going to probably cut this off, but I'll have 2 or 3 other ones that'll take off. It's just what burning bushes do. A little weak going in. I want this one down a little farther because I want it to bush down here. There was a bad cut last year, but it's starting to get a bud there, so it could stay, but I'm going to take that off. And this is that one going up the middle. Whenever possible, get them out of the middle. Air and light down through them. And this is something, it's burning bushes, it's going to have a million branches. So if you keep them thinned out every year, it's a simple, easy trim. But if you do the shearing and get them thick and dense, you're in trouble. They like burning bushes too. I'll get into that. Okay, to me, that's really good.
So it's now the time to trim those.
Oh, anything in your yard, basic, except for things like a lilac. You can go through and thin them now, but you don't want to cut them back until after they're done blooming. They bloom off of new wood. There ain't a lot of plants that do that. Some viburnums do. Well, that's baby's breath is a perennial now. But anyhow, rhododendrons, azaleas, you don't want to trim them until they're done blooming. Because you trim them now, you'll just have some inside buds. You really won't even see them.
How about the Japanese ace?
The what?
The Japanese
Goats are coming in next.
maple.
Weeping ones? Upright ones? The poor weeping Jap maple. Everybody plants them on top of their sidewalk, on top of their driveway, and they're beautiful when they can get some width. How many people got old weeping Jap maples at home? How many's got a bunch of white dead branches inside of them? That's because you're not thinning them out and no air movement and that. Take your hand, the easiest thing, and just flop through, they'll break right out of there. But you got to open up the top and thin them. I just trimmed the one at the house this morning. Took me 20 minutes. I got a whole big 65-gallon can of clippings off of it. Looks like a scarecrow. Mrs. Pandy used to always yell that I killed it and gonna kill it and all that stuff, but the thing's beautiful every year. As soon as it leaves out, you can't tell I touched it. Okay, so here we go. Now, if you want this thing not to get bigger, anything up off of a branch, you'll take off. I wish I had a bigger one to show you. Now, sometimes on a Jap maple, they're really neat when you get a branch to do what I told you don't have to do. So that's something when it gets older. If you see something that might be going around and want to head this way, use your own judgment on it. We got one that froze out and it's in the garden area by that snowbell I was telling you about out in the garden area. And that thing's got some really neat, there's branches that ran over each other. I left it on there because it looks like an Oriental Japanese thing. Now, if this thing was too big, then I'd start doing stuff like that. There's way too many branches in here. And this is just a young one. Now there's one branch coming from here out that way. So we're going to get rid of him. There's one coming up over there going that way. So we're going to get rid of him. competing branching, and this is going over, that one's going over the top, so we're going to take that out of there. This
What
side,
you mean by competing branches is one going over the top of the other one?
that, or when you get two of them right together. See, like both these little ones here are going this way. Don't really want that. This one's going that way, so see, this whole thing's going. Now, that's something you can play with. You want to let this one grow and get taller and go that way? Because every year, if I'm going to trim it, I can take care of it. But I'm assuming we're not, so. And this is something else I'm a firm believer in. Now, there's something could be called a competing branch. These two here.
Okay.
This has got 4 or 5 branches in there. And I started to say, this is something I'm a firm believer in. If you're ever in doubt thinking whether you should or you shouldn't, what should you do? Cut it. Cut it. Now these 2 branches going together there, I don't. Okay, for a young jab maple, I can quit there. This could be called a competing branch there and there too. That one's coming out of there. That's coming off of there.
For a larger job, make them like mine, just go and start cutting from the inside, eliminate a lot of that.
Get all that dead stuff out of there first. Look for anything big crossing over. But now the one I did this morning, I do it every year. I'm cutting off links of branches this big. Because if you prune properly, it actually makes plants grow faster. Now that was just a young plant, so it don't really give you true evaluation of it. But
You get the ones that stick straight up on the top.
if you want it to get bigger, you leave every so often and go up, because that's a slow process getting height on a weeping jab maple. Just so you got good air through them. Should almost look like that snowbell tree I sent that picture around of. Just think of something just solid there. Look at the old one compared to the new one.
Yeah, well, it's got real tall, it's got like an umbrella.
Yeah.
Type of that. You kind of stick around it.
Don't snip, thin it just like I did. Big sections. I wish I had a picture of the one at the house, but I ain't got it, so. Okay. Yeah, let's just do this guy. Whatever. This is a pink weeping cherry. It's going to get 25 feet tall, 20 feet across. It can be controlled and kept down if you want to. Snow fountains are a much smaller version, but they're white. There is a new pink one out that isn't supposed to get real big, but still they're going to get bigger than what most people want them to. So if you react right away with a young tree, you can keep them. I ain't going to do a lot on this one because it's just a young tree. I already got, heck, they picked that one because they said I'm going to butcher it, so. But like if I didn't want it to get bigger, I'd cut that branch off. And it don't really need to be there anyhow. Okay, that made it a little more even already. This is what you'd call a competing branch.
Sometimes you cut the bigger one instead of the.
You always look for the bigger one first. This one here is crossing over in front of all those things. Don't like that, so I don't really want. I'm going to try to keep this thing smaller, so we'll take that off of there. And then this one I don't like. Now, as young a tree as it is, I didn't probably have to do that, but see, this is one that got cut there. See what's happening? And I just hate that, so we're going to get rid of that problem right now. And this one's a little longer. Always look for one going outward, too. Don't ever cut at an inward one. But that makes me happy for now. This is a dwarf Japanese snowbell viburnum family. Most viburnums get 10, 12 foot or can get 12 foot. You can see where they got cut, umbrellaed. I don't like them, brother. If I cut that there, but I'm going to get that out because that's going up the middle. I'm going to get that one out because it's too tall and it ain't never going to match up. Got light branching there, light branching there. I don't really want to. We're going to go for this year and get past these knuckles. Leave that there. That's probably be one I take off next year. That one. And just with that many cuts, I'm happy with that one. You see how much I took off with just 5 cuts. So if you don't let them get thick, big, overgrown to begin with, but whenever possible you see a knuckling occurring, that's when you want to go and get it cut off.
So it's okay to take them down to that height?
Well, you can go down farther if you want.
I'm twice there right now.
Yeah, viburnums, it's just the viburnums are going to bloom. You probably just left yours going too long, so I tell you to bite the bullet. Cut it down to wherever you want. Your flowering ain't going to look that great this year, but you're going to get it down to where you can control it from there on. That's what they say. Take a third off this year, a third off next year, and a third off the following year on old stuff, if you want to be politically correct. But it's like Weigelias. They look so much prettier when they got new growth. So that's when you want to thin in the winter. When they're done blooming the first time, you go back and cut them back the part. Now, if you cut everything back to begin with, you just take away the beauty and lace gracefulness of that bloom. 9 bark, oh, very vicious, fast-growing plant. There are dwarf varieties. Cut them back and thin them every year a lot. You want your 9 bark this big, cut them down that big.
Seems like so much dead wood in it.
That's because you have never thinned them. If you do this pruning I'm telling you about, you won't have that problem. Now, because I'm going to assume yours has been in 3, 4, 5 years, you've done nothing but whack them. You got all kinds of wood down there. That's where you need the pocket saw, the lopers. Just go in there and thin them out. Cut them down to 18 inches now, then go in and thin them.
So before they bloom.
Their flower ain't worth looking at. My opinion. They really picked me an ugly apple tree because they said I'm going to brutulate it. So here we go. This tree is probably second year we got it in. Last year, in my opinion, it was never cut back far enough. This is 1 year's growth like this. Now what happens, the most important thing, this is $69 tree. You should make a $19.99 tree out of it. Because when you get apples, it's going to be able to support the weight if it's cut back properly. Now, if I wanted to survive and still make myself feel better because I paid $69, and then I just go through there and there's a crossover, so you get rid of that. I don't like that one's too big for now. It ain't never going to support anything. And then we'll go into there and we'll cut that one down here just so we got them at different lengths. But now last year, if this was me,
Charlie Brown tree.
that's what I would have done to it.
I wish my wife was there.
See, so with the trimming you did on this apple tree right here, a year to recover from what you did, or by midsummer?
This was old enough that there way it's opened up as possible apple. You're not going to get that many apples off them anyhow. Now, if I would have done this last year, I might have got 4 or 5 apples and it wouldn't have broke the branches down or even broke the branches.
Well, this trimming you did, even if you don't get apples, will it be green enough where you feel like you got a living plant out
Let's just say there's 10 of these out back right now.
Okay.
In the next month and a half, nobody's going to buy this because they're just going to see big and ugly, but they think it's beautiful because it's big. By July or August, this will probably be the tree that's going to sell. out of all the ones that are left out of the other batches.
Okay, so it will recover
It's
from
yeah,
this
you're gonna have
trimming
leaves.
this
It's gonna look like yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because my question is always that when I trim it and my wife is not happy. and you know, I want to say, but baby, in 6 or 7 months, Marv said it's going to be. That's right. That's right.
It don't even have to take 6 or 7 months. It's over the years I've done stuff like this, and people just start. I guess you ain't going to sell that one. It's like burning bushes. I even cut them down farther than I did. And once they leaf out, give them a month's growth. They're the first plant that goes out of here, out of those batches.
Okay. And the time to start pruning is now.
Well, it was last fall or a month ago. You only got a couple more weeks for deciduous things. It isn't going to hurt to trim afterwards. It's just when they leaf out, you cannot see what you're doing. And if you trim fruit trees, you're liable to knock some of your buds off. That's the reason why you don't do it then.
Okay.
Now this is lilac. You can see it's all full of flowers. Now this really hasn't got cut back maybe 2 years ago. Might have had a few branches snipped on it, so we're not in too bad a shape. So first of all, we're looking through the middle again, and there's a crossover branch, so we get rid of that. There's a branch coming out of the middle there. See, that's the reason why you do it at this time of year, because you can sort of see what you're doing. That one's crossing over, so I want to get rid of that.
Do you trim magnolia trees too?
Sure. See, now these are competing branches. See 3 of them right there? Don't need 3. Get rid of that one. That's the bigger one, so we're going to get rid of that one. This is a tall one. Okay, that one's thinned out nicely. Now, when it's done blooming, if I want it shorter yet, or so it ain't this big next year, then as soon as it's done blooming, I may want to bring it back into there and leave them. Now, that's where it's going to knuckle, with the intention of the next year or two getting it off, because you're going to have growth come up through there. Okay, I guess we went through all the plants. Oh, I can tell I did a good job. They're throwing stuff at me. Okay, let's see what else we want to talk about. Anybody that does have fruit trees, it's past time to start spraying. There's where to go to?
There's something behind that roses.
Yeah, there we go. Horticultural oil or dormant oil. You can only spray this before you get green tip. We got green showing, so it's too late. The horticultural oil, you can use it both ways. There's a growing season thing on it, and there's a heavier mix for the dormant oil. Regular fruit tree. If you're not going to spray your fruit trees, save your money and don't buy them. You ain't going to have good fruit unless you spray. It tells you about 8-9 times a year they recommend. You at least got to do it 2 or 3 times. Pre-bloom, petal fall, and first cover are 3, in my opinion, the most important times to spray. But if you can hit them every 3 weeks through the summer, you're just better off. You definitely got to thin your trees every year. Just makes things easier. On an apple tree, an older one they called sucker shoots, they just go straight up off the main limbs. You want to alleviate almost all those things when you get to them.
That bottle that you have there, how many years will that last?
I would probably say if you have it 2 or 3 years and kept them freezing, you're probably all right.
Not freezing.
Yeah, that's the important thing. Anybody has dogwood trees, can't use this on an edible product, but the white birch trees, people are starting to plant them again. The boars used to get them. Uh, Pear trees, crabapple trees, they're all prone to getting lilacs, particularly get boars in them. This works on things like Jap beetles. If you got plants that the Jap beetles attack every year, it's a tree and shrub drench. It goes in the soil. You only got to do it once a year. The absolute best time is in the fall of the year around, 1st of October, end of September. It's when the tree sucks it up the most and gets up in the tree. Second best time is spring. Another week or two, things start growing. Can do it through the summer, only it's just a slower process and don't draw it up as fast. If you did it midsummer for any reason, I tell you to redo it in the fall again.
Is that good for Mongo pine too?
Mugals, yeah, to help with the scale and all that. Magnolias particularly, they get full of city scale and different scales.
So what was that again?
Tree and shrub drench goes in the ground. Neem oil, it's pretty much an organic spray for if you want to spray your bushes, don't want to get into chemicals. Spinosad is really, really good spray. It's almost organic. It's actually made from some kind of rum extract. Now we're to the deer. Hydrangeas, the pinnacles, they love them. The best stuff to keep them away, but you have to apply it a couple times a week. It is not that hard. You just got to do it. Now, there's other things out there. These bags, I'm going to get to them. But most of your sprays are like $16 for a quart. Repels off, works real good too. You don't have to waste it. It don't take a whole lot. I actually alternate, but I know Milorganite does it by itself. It's actually a fertilizer, so you're not throwing money away. If you got big areas you want to cover, you can get a 30-pound bag, I think, for $26. Very cost efficient. It's easy to spread. Like I say, you just got to go out there a couple times a week. Now, sometimes you can stretch it out, but if you're stretching it out, just make sure you watch, because in a couple nights they can devour everything you've been trying to keep them away.
So
Feather,
when should you start putting that down?
anytime. Keep them away before they find out there's something good there they really love.
Okay.
Won't have to
So
do it.
actually, because I got that last year, and I should start sprinkling some of that out.
Yeah,
in
don't
beds.
waste it. Like I said, I treat like a 30 by 30 area. I feed the deer, and I got a garden. My vegetable garden is in containers, and it's 30 feet away from my vegetable garden. As long as I do it on a regular basis, they won't touch it. Now, once in a while, I'll get lazy and don't do it for a week or 2 weeks. I see some tomato plants, the leaves are chewed off and dropped there, so back at it I go again. And my pinnacles, they've been out there 3 years since I planted them. First 2 years, they devoured the flowers. Last year, another direction, so went and did it. We got sun impatiens. We planted probably over 200 6-inch pots of them, and deer just love the flowers on them. Kept them off all summer long. Got towards the end of the year, 1st of October. I was just going to freeze in a couple weeks. Well, it didn't freeze. Within 2 weeks, there wasn't a flower out there.
Will that also work on rabbits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And there's a disease going through boxwoods. This is a revitalized thing. I ain't going to swear to it because I like to see things work for proof of my own first. We've been selling tons of it. Whether it's from advertising or not, I don't know. But boxwoods are taking a beating. So that's the reason why I said it's unbelievable how much stuff we sold of it, though. Your Spoma products, best fertilizer, whether you buy Hollytone, Plant Tone. I just technically can't tell you to put tree tone on your vegetables because it don't list vegetables. But if you read what goes in it, hardly anything changes in any of their products. Slight differences here and there, but they make all the tones. Roses are very heavy feeders, so fertilize them at least once a month. Put a handful around your plants. And the next thing with roses, really recommend this. It ain't a total answer, but get it down early. If you got any old leaves laying around from last year, get them raked up because that's how fungus starts up from spores. But you put this, it's got a fertilizer in it, but forget the fertilizer. It ain't got enough fertilizer in there to do anything. It's got an insect control in it, and it's got a disease control in it. So, and if you see any black spot on your roses or anything, try picking them off. Don't leave them lay in the ground. Don't water from the top because that's how it spreads. Bouncing water makes the fungus spread.
What about knockout roses?
Knockout roses, I don't know what's going on with them. They're not as prolific as what they were when they first came out. Uh, they're not supposed to get black spot. I've seen black spot on them, but it never gets to a point where it makes them totally defoliate themselves. Uh, Still recommend them. Pretty
What are
fun.
you pruning?
Yeah, get them cut down now before they start to grow. And if you've got old ones that were doing good and you got tons and tons of canes in there, get yourself a long handle pair of loppers so you don't get cut up, and get down inside and try to get some of those old dead canes out of there and alleviate some of the new ones. It's just going to make a healthier plant. And pick up on the fertilizing on them too.
I was
They're,
told February to prune roses was the best time.
you're going to talk to 10 different people on anything you hear here. And half the people that writing these articles and talking about stuff, they really don't have a clue what they're talking about, I don't think. If you're ever in doubt and you can't find somebody you trust, take majority rule. If you want to trim in February, it ain't going to hurt anything, but I'd do it in the fall and get it out of the way if it was me. Now, some people I've heard, they say trim them halfway back in the fall, then come back in the spring and trim them down the rest of the way. To what percentage it might be, just get it done during the winter months and get it done before they start to. Oh yeah, they like cold temperatures. They just don't. The plant don't like extreme. Here's the next thing. Everybody blames the cold winters for killing things. It's more of the clay soil we have around here, and it stays as saturated and wet is what kills most things. It ain't so much the cold. The cold just helps things along if it's a weak plant. Mild winter sometimes will kill more plants, and sometimes winter damage don't show up until June or July when we start getting in the heat of the summer. The cambium layer got ruined. That's what draws their feed up from the roots is the cambium layer. It's just underneath the bark layer. And if it was damaged during a warm winter with freezing and thawing, that's worse than a winter that gets cold and stays cold. Yeah.
When should I trim that major wheeler?
Who's Major Wheeler? The butterfly?
The ones that are the honeysuckle.
Oh, the honeysuckles now.
How do I tell the dead from the alive? That's the problem I have with that thing is I don't know the dead.
Where you got it at?
Right in front, both of them in front of my shed.
Oh, on each side. Yeah, see, you got that vine. That's where I'd almost tell you cut them 2/3 of the way back every year and just let them
Well, that's what I did. I may do it again. Okay, I did it when they.
because once they start intermingling and going up through, it's like a climbing hydrangea. It's like a wisteria. Once they start wrapping themselves around each other, there ain't a lot you can do.
Is it too late to come down?
No, just hurry and do it. Got another week or two.
I'll have your guys do it.
I got a weeping red bud, but it's just all knotted up, comes down, hasn't been pruned in a long time. Just how much can you take out?
Much as you should take out.
Seems like a lot.
Do it.
You know how much to take out. We don't. We don't know what will kill it.
Just everybody when you leave, that Japanese snowbell is out there right next to the wall. It starts up on Grizzle Road, right next to it. And look at the ginkgo, all the trees in the front, especially the Camperdown elm. You guys are all going to laugh at that. But I do that to that tree every year. It's probably the nicest Camperdown elm you're going to find anywhere in Ohio, Michigan, wherever. And because most of the time they're just such a big leaf, they get full of bugs, insects, and disease. That thing you will not be able to see through it by middle of May. And right now it's got a trunk like this, 3 arms about this big around, and it might have 15 branches that long, smaller than my finger sticking out of it. So the red bud, and don't ever just trim the ends, go through there and cut some bigger sections. That's where you want to get a good pair of loppers or that pruning saw, because if you haven't done it, you had it any length of time, and it's just going to make a prettier tree.
I've got a crab coral burst, and it's probably got a base like that. I noticed this year, the inside of it, there must be 400 branches that come out like that out of each one of these stems.
It's
You need to cut them out?
it'd be nice if you do. It's just a heavy branched, symmetrical, gorgeous crab tree.
That's the way it's supposed to.
It still can get big. That goes back to, I learned the hard way. You know, read the book 10 by 10. Well, it figures it's going to be 25 by 25. You don't do nothing to it. Just the way it is. But ideally, if you can go through and thin it, yeah. We planted one for Sugar Ridge at his house in Amherst. And it's down by the road, and it's been 20 years ago. I never thought it would get as big as it did. He can limb it up so he can see going underneath it at the road, and it took a long time to get big, but he's never touched it. It's just absolutely beautiful, but they branch kind of low, and they're just thick.
This building in the middle, like, I mean, you trim
Oh.
that one out front, I saw how you trim that. You don't trim this that way, though.
You don't want to get that drastic with it.
Did the same thing here. I mean, it's just,
They're 6 inches long, every one, 5 inches long.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
I was thinking about figuring that out.
Regular crabs get them. They're called water sucker shoots, but they'll grow 4 foot a season off limbs. They just fly up through there. But that coral burst is so thick, it's going to sort of stun them once they leaf out. But yeah, if you can get through there with a little pocket saw or something, it doesn't take as long to do things as you think. It's going to take longer than you might want, but you can get it done a lot quicker than you
do
think.
that after it flowers.
No, do it now.
You do it now.
Telling you, see what you're doing, do it. You wait, that thing gets full of leaves and everything, you ain't gonna know what you're doing, especially as thick as they are.
When you're pruning like a rose, a large stalk of rose, and you see brown dead wood and new wood, do you prune it on the dead wood side or the fresh?
On the same branch you're talking about?
Yes.
I'd get rid of the whole cane as long as there's got other canes next to them.
What if that's just one coming out of the ground? Just one.
Then just cut that dead off.
You don't leave any of the green on at all?
Yeah, leave the green, just cut the dead part off.
Oh, okay. So,
If you only got one branch.
yeah.
You only got one branch, dig it out and get a new one.
Well, that's why I'm here.
I've got a arborvitae too, that's probably 5 foot tall now. But it's golden, but the branches come out like this. And it's all nothing but long branches. I've got some old ones I can control, but what do I do with these? Do I trim them back just that little bit on each one?
No, trim them. Shear them if you want to. Golden arborvitae, you don't know what the variety though. There's so many plants now to say golden arborvitae, it could be. But that, I never really seen one. It must be really healthy because they usually don't grow that much limb on one branch to stick
I
out.
was surprised too because my other ones didn't.
Now there's some gold cedars that do that.
Yeah,
And they look, cedar and arborvitae is in the same family. So if it's that and it's natural and does it look good? It's just growing.
I'm afraid of the snow. Just
Yeah, well,
trimming the branches.
hand prune those big ones.
Just get rid of some of those.
Yeah, cut them way back. Do it now. Don't do them all. Do the longer ones. And then midsummer, when you get new growth covering up where you cut a few more of the long ones then. Just keep up with it. Unless you just want to start shearing and make a tight arborvitae, but I don't think you got a true arborvitae. It's probably in the cedar family. If there's nothing else, I guess that's it.
Thank you.
You gotta. Thank you all. Been a good class.
We got some giveaways.